Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day, wherever you are. I'd love for you to share in the comments which city or country you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let's begin our story together. The hospital smelled like a nauseating blend of antiseptic, fear, and burnt coffee. Every breath was a sharp reminder of where I was and why I couldn't leave. Sitting on a rigid plastic chair that seemed designed to punish, I held my son Mateo's hand. His skin, usually warm and vibrant, felt feverish and fragile under my fingers. He was 8 years old, and his heart, that tiny, miraculous machine I'd first felt beating inside me, was failing. The monitors beside us flickered with hypnotic monotony, tracing green lines that marked the fragile boundary between my world and total collapse. Mateo slept, or at least it seemed that way. His breathing was shallow, a whisper in the silent room. Dr. Morales, a man with the weary kindness of someone who delivers bad news daily, had been crystal clear. Atypical congenital heart disease, he said, using words that sounded foreign and terrifying. He needs surgery, immediately. The basic insurance I could barely afford with my part-time job as a data transcriber laughed in the face of such a procedure. It was like trying to put out a forest fire with a glass of water. Seeing the panic in my eyes, Dr. Morales pulled me aside in the crowded hallway. "Listen, Sophia," he said. "The hospital can start preparations, but we need a deposit for the materials and the specialist. A bare minimum, 24 hours. 24 hours. Time had become an enemy, stalking me. How much was this bare minimum? I was afraid to ask. When I finally did, the number hit me like a punch to the stomach, 5,000 pesos. For some, it was the cost of a fancy dinner, a new pair of shoes, a night of drinks. For me, it was a mountain as high and unreachable as Popocatépetl. My savings had evaporated months ago, consumed by doctor visits, medications, and missed workdays to care for Mateo. My mind raced, searching for solutions, opening and closing imaginary doors with frantic speed. I had nothing to sell, no one to borrow from. My few friends lived paycheck to paycheck, just like me. Then, like a dark shadow at the back of my mind, a name emerged, a name I hadn't wanted to utter in years: Valeria, my sister. A shiver ran down my spine, a coldness unrelated to the hospital's air conditioning. Thinking of her was like touching an open wound. Valeria, the successful, the impeccable, the one who'd climbed the corporate ladder with a ferocity that always intimidated me. She was the regional director of Banco Metropolitano. For her, 5,000 pesos was pocket change. I remembered my days at UNAM in the Faculty of Sciences. I loved mathematics, the logical elegance of algorithms, the hidden beauty in patterns. I dreamed of artificial intelligence, of building complex systems. My family, especially Valeria, mocked me. "A useless hobby," she said once with a condescending smile. "Pretty girls don't need to fill their heads with numbers." Then Mom got sick, and I had to drop out to care for her. It was the same mother who, years later, sided with Valeria when they stripped me of the only thing I had left. The idea of asking Valeria for help turned my stomach. It was like kneeling before the person who'd helped dig the hole I was in. But then I looked at Mateo, his small chest rising and falling with difficulty, and I knew I had no choice. My pride, my dignity, my pain, none of it mattered. Only that green line on the monitor did. I stood, straightened my wrinkled clothes, and approached his bed. I kissed his forehead, a kiss that carried a silent promise. "Everything will be okay, my love," I whispered. "Mommy will fix this." I left the hospital, and the polluted air of Mexico City felt strangely fresh. I had a mission. I would face my sister. I would beg, humiliate myself if necessary. I would get that money. I didn't know then that this day wasn't just about fighting for my son's life. I was about to witness the death of the last shred of hope I held for my own family. The lobby of Banco Metropolitano in the heart of Polanco was another world, a parallel universe of cold marble, polished steel, and a reverential silence that only money could buy. The air smelled expensive, a subtle citrus air freshener mixed with the leather of the armchairs and the perfume of the women who walked with a confidence I'd forgotten how to feel. My worn shoes, the only ones I owned without holes, seemed to scream my status as an intruder on the gleaming floor. I felt like a smudge of dirt on an immaculate canvas. I approached the reception desk, clutching my tattered cloth bag to my chest like a shield. The receptionist, a young woman with flawless makeup and a rehearsed smile, looked me up and down, a flicker of disdain crossing her face before she asked, "How may I help you?" "I need to see the regional director, Valeria Reyes," I said, my voice weaker than I intended. "I'm her sister." The word sister seemed to confuse her. She glanced at my clothes again, my pale, haggard face, and doubt settled in her eyes. After a tense, whispered phone call, she directed me to wait on one of the leather armchairs that seemed worth more than everything I owned. The wait was torture. Every executive who passed, every client with their leather briefcase made me feel smaller, more insignificant. Finally, I saw her. Valeria descended the grand spiral staircase, her stiletto heels clicking sharply on the marble. She wore a blood-red tailored suit, an impeccable armor that screamed power. Her hair was pulled into a perfect bun, not a strand out of place. She was the embodiment of success, the personification of everything I was. She stopped a few feet away, her face a mask of cold disbelief. She didn't invite me to her office or offer me a glass of water. She just stood there, judging me with her eyes. "Sophia, what the hell are you doing here?" Her voice was a whip. I stood, my hands trembling. "Valeria, I need your help, it's Mateo." The words tumbled out as I explained the situation, the surgery, the urgency, the 5,000 pesos. Each word seemed to shrink and die in the icy air around her. She listened without blinking, arms crossed. When I finished, a cruel, twisted smile curled her perfectly painted lips. 5,000 pesos, she repeated, then laughed, a short, joyless laugh that echoed in the silent lobby. Heads turned toward us. "Let me guess, you spent it all on drugs, and now you're here to scam me with some ridiculous story about the kid." The world stopped, my blood turned to ice. The accusation, so vile and so public, left me breathless. "No, Valeria, how can you say that? He's your nephew," I stammered, feeling tears burn my eyes. "That kid stopped being my nephew the day you decided to ruin your life," she snapped, her voice rising. "I'm not going to fund your vices. I won't let you keep tarnishing this family's name." She stepped closer, her face inches from mine, her expensive perfume suffocating me. I felt her hand on my shoulder, not in comfort, but with a force that pushed me backward toward the revolving door. "Now get out of here. You're embarrassing my clients." I stumbled onto the street, blinded by tears and humiliation. The afternoon sun felt brutally bright. I stood on the sidewalk, trembling as the world moved on indifferently. The bank's door opened again. It was Valeria. She opened her designer purse, pulled out a crumpled bill, and threw it at me. The paper, a 200 peso note, hit my cheek before falling to the dirty ground. "Here," she spat, her voice dripping venom. "This is so you stop looking so pathetic. You're a disgrace to the Ray's name." She turned and walked back into her world of marble and steel, leaving me alone on the sidewalk, my heart broken and my dignity in pieces at my feet. A young teller, Andres, had followed her to the door and looked at me from inside. His face was a mix of horror and pity, the only hint of humanity I saw in that place. I stared at the crumpled bill on the ground. 200 pesos, the price my sister put on her nephew's life, the value of my humiliation. In that moment, something inside me broke forever. But as the old, fragile structure of my soul collapsed, something new, hard and sharp as a diamond, began to form. I returned to my rooftop room in the doctor's neighborhood like a ghost. The metro ride was a blur of anonymous faces and shoves. Each rattle of the train seemed to hammer Valeria's words into my skull. Pathetic, disgrace, vices. At the tenement, I climbed the concrete stairs with heavy legs, as if each step was another year of my failed life. My room was small, barely space for a bed, a table, and a small electric stove. The peeling walls and bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling were silent testaments to my existence. I collapsed onto the bed, the mattress sagging under my weight, and for the first time in a long time I cried. I cried with the force of a wounded animal, with sobs that tore the air from my lungs and left me empty. I cried for Mateo, for my helplessness, for the cruelty of a world that kicks you when you're already down. It was Doña Isabel, my neighbor from the courtyard, who found me. A 70-year-old widow with skin etched with wrinkles and eyes full of quiet wisdom. She said nothing. She simply entered, sat on the edge of my bed, and placed her bony hand on my back. Her touch was warm, real. When my sobs turned to silent trembling, she got up and returned minutes later with a steaming bowl of noodle soup and a small cloth envelope. "Eat, child," she said softly. "The soul needs fuel just like the body." As I sipped the soup, which tasted of pure kindness, she placed the envelope in my hands. It was filled with coins and a few carefully folded small bills, her savings, the money she kept for her own emergencies. "It's not much, but it's yours for the boy," she whispered. The generosity of this stranger, a woman who had almost nothing, was such a stark contrast to the cruelty of my own blood that it physically hurt. I told her everything, the words pouring out in a bitter torrent. She listened, nodding slowly. That night, unable to sleep, I stared at the orange glow of the city through my small window, and my mind drifted to the past, to the root of all this rot. I was 18. My grandmother, the only person in my family who saw the spark in me, had died, leaving me a small plot of land in Cuernavaca. "For your education, Sophia," her letter read, "and for your children's future, so you never depend on anyone." I was young, naive, and trusted my family. I remember the scene like it was yesterday. We were in the living room of my parents' house in Del Val. My father, Don Fernando, with his patriarchal air. My mother, Elvira, always eager to please him. And Valeria, newly engaged to Ricardo Linares, a young politician with ambition as sharp as his suits. They placed papers in front of me. "It's to manage the property better, daughter," my father said with a paternal smile. Tax issues, it's complicated. Sign them, we'll take care of it. Valeria added with her know-it-all older sister tone, it's the smart thing, Sophie. This way, you don't have to worry about anything. And I signed, I trusted. 6 months later, I learned from an old neighbor of my grandmother that the land had been sold. When I confronted them, the facade crumbled. The money from the sale had been used to pay for Valeria's extravagant wedding and to fund Ricardo's first campaign for a local deputyship. My inheritance, my future, had become canapés and campaign posters. My father didn't even have the decency to look remorseful. He looked at me with cold eyes and declared, "The money is better with those who know how to use it. Understand, Sophia, in this family there are winners and burdens, and you, with your books and foolish dreams, were never going to be a winner." That night in my rooftop room, holding the savings of a kind old woman, I understood the truth in all its rawness. My family hadn't just abandoned me, they'd stripped me bare, erased me, sentenced me to be a burden forever. And in accepting that truth, I felt the ground beneath my feet disappear. I was in free fall at the bottom of the abyss. But sometimes, only in the deepest darkness, can you see the tiniest spark of light.